A tango for three is never a good idea. James Henry, a popular Tanzanian snake catcher, was called on duty back in 2022, but instead of focusing on his task, he decided to take a little detour and charm his audience. This detour cost him his life. Hit like and subscribe. This is Fierce. James Henry, a 60-year-old man from Kigoma, Tanzania, made a name for himself due to his extraordinary ability to catch some of the most venomous snakes and occasionally play with them in order to attract an audience. You see, James was a talented snake whisperer who dabbled from time to time in snake charming. He was a showman, and he would have done anything if that would have raised him to fame. Snake charming is the practice of appearing to hypnotize a snake, often a cobra, by playing and waving around an instrument called a pungi. A typical performance may also include handling the snakes or performing other seemingly dangerous acts, as well as other street performance staples like juggling and sleight of hand. During a performance, snake charmers may take a number of precautions. The charmer typically sits out of biting range, and the snake is usually sluggish due to starvation or dehydration and is reluctant to attack anyway. More drastic means of protection include removing the reptile's fangs or venom glands, drugging the snake, or even sewing the snake's mouth shut. The 60-year-old man had never resorted to these types of drastic actions in his performances because he knew how to interact with the snakes and how to keep them from biting him. This mindset convinced him that he could do another fascinating performance, but it would turn out to be his last. On a March day back in 2022, James Henry was called to remove two large cobras that had made their way to a village in the area of Kigoma. Known as the local snake catcher, Henry couldn't let his community down. So he gathered his equipment, got into his car, and drove to the location, thinking this was an easy, fast job. For some people, snakes embody fear and danger. But for James, who had lived all of his life surrounded by slithering companions, snakes were just another reptile. Arriving at the scene, James met the culprits. The two cobras were majestic. Even the villagers gathered around to watch the reptiles, and most importantly, watch how James handled them. After assessing the situation, James came up with his plan. He had two brave villagers on standby if anything went wrong. Someone who instructed the crowd to stay as far away as possible, and his bare hands. Before he could take his first steps toward the reptiles, one of them hissed and got into defensive mode. The crowd went crazy. Gasps were heard from every direction. People started whispering, and some even ran away back to the safety of their homes. The annoyed cobra displayed more violent behavior. It slithered toward the crowd, then toward the other cobra, then toward the snake whisperer. Then it got into attack mode. The snake stood almost upright, opened its hood, and showed its fangs to the crowd. Before it could attack anyone, James, in a brave leap, caught the cobra and decided then and there that it wasn't possible to safely remove it from the area. Instead, he killed it. The audience was in shock. Some shouts of support were heard, while some disapproved of his actions. Henry wasn't a man to just stand back and receive criticism, especially from strangers. The 60-year-old fervently explained that there wasn't anything to be done. It was life or death. He decided that in order to keep the villagers safe, the cobra must be killed. A cobra's bite contains neurotoxins that affect the prey's nervous system, and depending on the cobra's size, the bite can be fatal. In rural parts of Africa, where extensive medical care is oftentimes non-existent, it's especially difficult to access antivenom, so many people unfortunately perish shortly after being bitten. And there are a lot of cobras around, in Tanzania more so than in other places. Tanzania is renowned for its abundant and diverse wildlife, as well as the sheer quantity of species found there. Tanzania is home to over 4 million wild animals. But among these glorious animals, Tanzania also serves as the home of over 40 species of snakes. The most popular one? The Egyptian cobra. Many snakebite incidents occur in Tanzania due to the Egyptian cobra, which is one of the most venomous snakes. It's one of the largest cobras on the African continent, spanning almost 8.5 feet, and more often than it should, it slithers all the way to villagers, causing chaos and fear in the communities. This is exactly what James wanted to avoid, so he continued his task. Now the 60-year-old man was supposed to remove the second cobra, which was significantly calmer than its friend. At that moment, James thought to himself, why not put on a show for the people who are watching me right now? It would be such a waste to let this snake go so easily. So carefully approaching the predator, James wrapped his hands around the snake and held it victorious in front of the crowd. Gasps, wows, and cheers filled the air. Everyone watched in awe as the cobra moved diligently over the man's body. Then James sat down, brought the cobra in front of him, and started to hypnotize the animal with his flute. The snake swayed along to the music, following James's movements. However, right in the middle of the song, the cobra lunged at the man, biting his fingers and then his mouth, causing his show to abruptly end. The music stopped, replaced by the screams of the audience. James was taken aback by the snake's behavior, but instead of panicking, he reacted quickly and caught the reptile, placing it in a cage in the back of his car. This wasn't the first time a venomous snake bit James. Working for many years in the company of cobras, puff adders, black mambas, and many other venomous snakes that populated Tanzania, he knew exactly what he needed to do. Accompanied by 2 villagers, he went to the closest medical facility in order to receive antivenom. They had to get there as fast as possible. Because of his age and other medical problems, James was on the verge of death if he didn't receive proper medical care in the next 30 minutes. Symptoms of the bite began to show fast. His fingers were aching and his lips were already swelling at an impressively rapid rate. Sitting in the back seat of his car, unable to drive himself to the hospital, James started to feel dizzy and nauseous. Just a few more minutes left of the journey. His heart pounding in his chest, the 60-year-old man's breathing became more and more difficult. He was in and out of consciousness by the time they arrived. At the medical center, the doctors hastily administered antivenom, cleaned the wounds that the snake left on James's fingers and face, and tried their best to save him. Unfortunately, after a brutal fight against the cobra's venom, James's body finally gave up. It's difficult to know what prompted James Henry to put his life at risk by playing with the venomous snake. With so many years of experience backing him up, he should have known you'd never mess with snakes.